Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. This is Arkus's Lunch and Learn, and we are going to go ahead and get started now, right on time, at about 12:15. And as you know, the agenda for today is talking about 4 flows that every admin needs to know. We will be covering flows in detail, 4 specific examples, and talking a little bit about the overview of how a flow functions, how it works, and how you can hopefully take some of these ideas presented in the presentation today and apply them in practice to your own organizations. We'll start with brief introductions, go over a very high level anatomy of a flow, and then move right into the live demonstration. We do have Arkus staff members today. Scott and James will be answering your questions throughout, so please place them in the questions section in GoToMeeting. Just a quick high-level overview of Arkus. So who is Arkus? Who are we? Arkus has been a Salesforce and Salesforce.org premium consulting partner for more than a decade. We've completed more than 1,600 Salesforce projects for more than 600 clients. You can see here some of our Salesforce awarded specializations, and there will be a link shared in the chat with some more ways to connect with us. As for me, my name is Blake Mahaffey. I'm a multi-certified Salesforce administrator. I have about 8 years of experience, mostly an accidental admin in the nonprofit space before now. I'm based in Tampa Bay. I'm a huge fan of kayaking music and automation. And speaking of automation, you know, it's everywhere we look these days. If you're on this call, you're probably familiar with it in a business context, but even in our personal lives, right? It's taking over everywhere. Your smart fridge is, you know, can alert you when you're running low on milk. Even if you're just setting your alarm clock in the morning, that's a form of automation. But today we're going to be looking at automation in a Salesforce lens, specifically with Flow. It's a really good time to learn Flow, considering that workflow and process builder will be sunset in 2023. At that point, Salesforce has mentioned that no new workflows or process builders will be able to be created. So if you're on this call today, you're already taking your first steps towards, you know, learning about Flow and making sure that your organization is able to adapt to this new standard. It really is the future of Salesforce declarative automation. Before we get into the live demonstration today, I just want to talk about a couple high-level terms. Flows are a declarative non-code solution to automation. You can find the Flow Builder in the setup and the administrative console. Flows are typically created with elements and resources, and they can be triggered with a button. They can be triggered automatically when invoked or on a schedule. An element in a flow represents an action that the flow can execute. And when we move into the live demo, you will see me reference elements quite a bit. They might be things like getting records, updating records, deleting records, sending emails. Elements use resources to help determine action criteria. Resources are values that can be referenced throughout the flow. For instance, they could be references to fields on records and even beyond that. And we'll have a pretty good example of how to use various different resources in the demonstration today. About the demonstration is really catered to newer people that are newer to flows, admins that are just learning Flow or are, you know, trying to get a little bit more utility under their belt about how to use it. Although if you are a Flow expert, I think you will find in the demonstration today that there's going to be a few things that you'll be able to take away from and apply in your organizations as well. All the flows today were built in a Trailhead playground on Sales Cloud, using primarily the opportunity object, but the use cases for these were developed to extend beyond just opportunities. You can take them and apply them to other objects, whether they're customer standard in your organizations. And once again, Arkus consultants are online to answer your questions related to Flow, so go ahead and place your questions in the questions panel. All right, let's move on to the Flow demonstration. I am in a Trailhead organization right now. And for our first steps today, rather than just jumping straight into Flow Builder, I'm going to give a demonstration of some of the functionality that our flows today will create. And I'm going to go ahead and do that by just creating a new opportunity. The first piece of functionality that I want to show, which is really useful, you probably have already developed something like this using workflow or a process builder perhaps in your own organizations, but standardizing record names is typically something we see as a very common use case. So the flow that we are going to start with today is how to standardize an opportunity name. And for the demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and put demonstration opportunity name in this new flow, or in this new record, excuse me. And I'm going to go ahead and just fill out a couple fields here, the amount and the close date, and also tie it to an account, tie it to the Arkus account. And when I save this opportunity, you'll see that this demonstration opportunity name will be updated to reflect a new standard. Oh, and I have to give it a stage. Go ahead and say perception analysis. And right there, you can see very quickly that the opportunity was renamed. We have the name of the account, the amount, and the close date of the opportunity all populated right here. So our first flow will demonstrate that functionality today. Additionally, other flows that we will be demonstrating include deleting opportunity line items from the opportunity object in bulk. This is particularly useful if you need to ever delete child records from a parent record and don't want to delete them line by line. And what I mean by that is we go ahead and add a couple opportunities here, or a couple products here. Let's add one more. Oops. We'll go ahead and add a number of opportunities. It's pretty common for deals when they're being restructured, or any sort of object that you have that has multiple child objects, especially when this number starts to get a lot higher and often goes through a period of revisions, for sales reps to want to be able to bulk delete opportunity line items and just start over rather than having to delete line by line. A quick quality of life update we can do is to actually have them create or delete this, or click a delete opportunity line items button, and this launches a flow which will actually automatically delete all related products to this opportunity. So this flow can be used to delete opportunity or child records in bulk and can be applied to any type of object you want as well, even though the demonstration today will be on opportunities. And finally, the other big piece of functionality we have today is how to launch a survey or a screen triggered flow from the opportunity as well. The use case for this would be, for instance, say I'm running an organization or a company that has customer feedback surveys. We want these surveys to be standardized input, and we want them to be conducted live. You can easily create a screen triggered flow to launch a survey. Right on the click of a button, that will pop up a nice, helpful survey wizard that reps can click, save, and automatically generate a telephone survey or a survey which is related to this opportunity in hand. So let's jump into the back end and look at how these flows work, and we'll build them as well as we go through. So our first flow, updating opportunity record names, it's going to look a little bit like this. And essentially, you can see when we talked about the anatomy of a flow a little bit earlier, the various elements throughout the flow. We have updating the opportunity. We also have a couple decision elements here, and we have an action element too. And we'll get into that right now, actually. Let's go ahead and build it. I'm going to deactivate this and move back to the flow builder and just start fresh with a brand new flow. And we're going to call this flow, it's going to be a record triggered flow because we're going to want to trigger this flow when a record is created, updated, or deleted. So whenever an opportunity record is created, we are going to go ahead and select opportunity as the object that will trigger the flow. We do want it, probably for when the record is just created, although you could use created or updated in this case if you really wanted to be firm on your standardizations of names and you never wanted that name to change. For now, I'm going to go ahead and just say when it's created. And we don't have any entry criteria because we want this to occur for every opportunity. We're going to select fast field updates. Fast field updates update fields on the record that trigger the flow. They're high performance. And if you know that you're just doing a quick update, something like updating a value on that same record or updating the name, it's really good to choose this. We're now into Flow Builder. And essentially, first thing we're going to do is go ahead and say we need to be able to create a formula that will standardize the name for us. So much like if you've done this in workflow, the first thing we need is a formula. And this formula is going to be a resource. And we're going to set the formula to have the output value that we want to be the standardized name. We'll do this by creating a new resource. And remember, a resource is a value that can be referenced throughout the flow. In this case, it's going to be a formula. We'll call this form and say standardize op name. You should always give your flows descriptions. I'm using a text expander today to quickly create the description for me. But when you're creating flows, do yourself a favor and make sure you are describing every element. Since we know this formula's result is going to live in the name field, we're going to want it to be a text data type. And now we can actually start inserting resources directly into the formula. You'll notice that I actually have right here a list of global variables, including the record global variable, which is an opportunity. This record global variable is going to contain values of the record that fired the flow always. And it's really useful for self-referencing values. So what we're going to want to go ahead and do is pick out the account. And we're going to look into the account object through a lookup. And we want the account name specifically. Okay, great. And an ampersand, and then a little space, little 2 quotation marks and a space is going to allow us to create a little bit of a space in the output to make it more legible. We'll do the exact same thing, looking at the record that fired the flow. We're going to go do amount now. Now, something to remember, this amount field is a currency field, and we're using a text output. So you're going to need to remember to put text in brackets in front of it in order to signify to Salesforce that the return type for this currency field will be converted into text. Otherwise, you will receive an error when you try to run your flow. Doing an ampersand as well as a pair of, or an ampersand as well as one space again, and then another ampersand. And this time we're going to do the close date and just place text in front of it as well, because similar to the amount field, close date is a date return value, and we need it to return to text instead. That looks good to me. We've created our formula to standardize the name. Next, we need to create an element, an update records element. And when we're thinking through this flow, we know that we want to update the record. So we have whenever an opportunity is triggered, let's update it. So update opportunity name is what we'll call this. We will use the opportunity record that triggered the flow. We'll always update the record. And once again, we are going to go ahead and we're going to set the field values for the opportunity record. So the field that we want to change is the name field, because we're standardizing the name every time. We'll set the field value of the name to be that formula that we just created. You see that once we create a resource, that is now available as an option in the values section of the set field values. We'll drag and connect them. And then we can now save. Flow label, standardize op names. I'll just call this something like Lunch and Learn, as we have a few of these. And for the description, I'm going to go ahead and use that text expander again, which just is a tool that we use here at Arkus to quickly be able to fill in repetitive text. In this case, it's perfect for the descriptions on our Lunch and Learn. But once again, please do remember to make your descriptions unique and actually descriptive. So we have our really basic flow here. It's just got one element, one resource in it. And it's a record triggered flow. We can actually debug it pretty easily if we click on the debug button and can search a opportunity to see if to use as a debug example. So what the debugger does is it allows you to essentially simulate a run of your flow. You should always debug your flows. You really should build them in a sandbox, but even when you put them in production, make sure you're debugging them after you've migrated them, just to be double sure. And we can find an opportunity here that doesn't have a standardized name. Let's go ahead and let's find one in our database. Edge installation would be fine. There we go. This one will go well. We can click run. And you can see right here, the debugger did not throw any errors at us. The flow ran. We ran it in rollback mode. You can see the details right here specifically. It'll tell you which opportunity triggered the flow, what its account ID is here, and more details as well. If I wanted to test the flow not in rollback mode, I would just click debug again. Oh, and it looks like actually for record triggered flows, they always run in rollback mode because it's the form that this tests. We'll just demonstrate rollback mode in another flow. Now, let's go ahead and activate this. You have to activate a flow in order to run it. We've already debugged it. We know there's no flaw with it, and we've saved it. Now that it's activated, we can go ahead and test it. And if you find the debugger limiting and you're doing this in a sandbox, activating it and just go ahead and manually testing it is a really good way to make sure that you have the functionality required. We will just quickly generate a new opportunity. And you can see that that name is standardized. So this flow does work as intended. For our next flow, we want to email an outside stakeholder when a big deal is created. So our use case is firing off automation that looks at the record, looks at its record type, and then decides whether or not to send an email. Now, for this second flow, typically we could demonstrate it as an entirely separate flow. However, since we're going to be using the opportunity object again, I'm going to go ahead and continue to build on this original flow. It's always best to consolidate your flows when you can, as it's not always clear the order of operations that Salesforce will trigger a flow to fire. So whenever you can, if you know that you're using the same object, try to add on the flows, utilize as many subflows as you can. Subflows are essentially flows that fire another flow. We won't be going over those today. But the less flows you have and the more consolidated they are, the easier it will be to manage your system. In order to build onto this standardized opportunity names that we just created, I actually have to go to the starting conditions. I'm going to change it to when a record is created or updated. And for the actions and related, I'm going to change the optimize the flow for actions and related records because I know I'm going to need to fire an action now from this flow. When I click done, you'll see that we have a number of more options available in the toolbox of the flow builder, specifically in the elements section. And our immediate next step is we always know that our records will update the opportunity name. So we're going to keep that. We always want to standardize our opportunity names. But the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create another element. This is a decision element, and it's going to help us fire a flow based on record criteria. I'm going to name this decision big deal. So our element today will be looking at whether the record type of the opportunity when logged is a big deal record type, or if it's not. And if it is a big deal record type, I want my outside stakeholder to know that a big deal has been created in Salesforce. Use case for this might be if you have a shared inbox that needs to have an email go to it based on a record creation, or an outside party that doesn't have access to Salesforce but still needs alerts or notifications. The use cases are pretty endless. Additionally, you can have this flow configured to pretty easily fire to a email located on a user record in Salesforce, but for today's demonstration, we will not be doing that. Now, in order for the flow to work, or in order for the outcomes to work, we need to define outcome details. The first thing we're going to do is say opportunity is a big, set this label. Let's say opportunity is big deal. And what we're going to look at is the global record variables to see, once again, the values of the record that fired the flow. We're going to look at the record type specifically. And there's something that is important to note when we're looking at record types in flows. You probably want to really avoid using a record type ID, because IDs change between sandboxes and production instances often. They're not always the same between instance to instance. Whereas something like the developer name, the API name of the record type doesn't change. So I typically prefer to use developer name when I am setting record type decision elements or using a record type at all. And my record type developer name for this record type is big deal. We have our first outcome right here. And I'm going to go ahead and rename the default outcome not big deal, just for the sake of clarity in this instance. I'll connect the two elements, and I'm going to go ahead and save. Remember to save your flows often. If you accidentally have the flow builder back out, or you lose your internet, you will lose your progress. And I definitely lost a good chunk of work with an internet drop, and I hadn't saved my flow in about 30 minutes, and it was not the funnest. So after this decision, we're going to need an action element. Essentially, this action is going to be to send an email. I'm going to go ahead and create the action element, click on filter by email, and then the email actions, send email. This is a really quick way to send an email directly from Flow. It's not an entire replacement for email alerts. You can trigger an email alert within a flow if you're used to that with workflow. The send email action is a little bit different and nuanced in the way it works. So in order for demonstration, I'm just going to go ahead and say label is email big op, put in our description. And right here, you can set the input values on this send email action. We can set the value of the body as well as the subject. And I actually can type in the value that I want right here. I could say a big deal has been created. And then the subject, a new record in Salesforce, but that doesn't actually provide my outside stakeholder a lot of information, right? Maybe they need specific information regarding the record that has triggered this flow. For now, I'm going to click done. In order to get that specific information, we need to create a new resource. And this resource is going to be a text template. And this text template essentially is going to be just what it sounds like. It's a resource that has a text on it, and we can utilize it in that email element in order to provide more information about the record that has fired this flow. So we will say email body as the API name for this. I'll start with saying a new big deal has been created in Salesforce. And now one thing that's really helpful about text bodies is you can actually use resources in them as well. And for this, the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and use resources from the record that has fired the flow. And you can see I can pull the amount of this detail or this opportunity in. I can pull in the close date as well as another field. And essentially, this is equivalent to what merge fields would be on an email template if you're used to using merge fields, putting in these values right now. I'll just put one more in for the demonstration. We'll say close date. Great. Okay, so we have our action create, or we have our template created. We have our action as well. I'm going to go ahead and throw that action in the body when I set input values. So the body will be this text template that I just created. When I drag the line from decision to action, I can choose which outcome sends it to that action. And it is when the opportunity is a big deal. Oh, and I have to provide an email recipient. Thank you, Flo. So going down to the action, you can see right here, email addresses. You have a collection where you can send to multiple email addresses. You also have comma separated email addresses. When you would use a collection is when you're pulling and scraping multiple emails from the rest of your Salesforce. We're not going to cover that today, but it might be a blog post, worthy of a blog post in the future. It's definitely a really neat feature, and you can use get records element to create email collections to have a pretty nuanced way of how you're using this send email core action rather than hard coding the email addresses here in this comma separated. Right now, I am going to go ahead and just put an email address in. I think I have a dummy inbox right here, the Arkus Lunch and Learn demo that I will use. And I will just go ahead and, if I can find my window, hard code that email in right there. And once again, do know that you can put in variables and resources into these email addresses values, so you can have them be somewhat dynamic. All right, let's save it. I'm going to go ahead and activate this and just double check our criteria, right? So it's always going to update the name. It's taking a look at the record type, so that the developer name is a big deal. It's going to then send an email to this Arkus Lunch Learn demo at gmail.com. And that's going to be called a new record in Salesforce. Let's go ahead and just save again for good measure. I'm going to go ahead and activate this one and just try to debug it live, considering we are in a sandbox and I anticipate it to work for the purposes of time today. And in order to do this, I essentially just need to create a big deal. I will say test demonstration for the opportunity name. We should see this renamed as well. Oops, and then I have to put in the stage. There we go. Now we have our flow that we see that the naming has worked. I don't know if an email has popped in. It looks like we're still waiting for it to come in the inbox. Aha, there we go. A new record has been created in Salesforce, but you'll notice we have this weird HTML formatting coming in. So this is because the email hasn't been formatted in rich text, and this is something that's really important to know if you're using an email send action, as most clients do use email rich text. We're going to want to go back to that action. Let's go ahead and make sure that we have the rich text formatted body option set to true. And that will send the email as a rich text. If we did not want the email to be a rich text, you can also go back to your text template resource that you created and view it as plain text. And you can see the formatting appears. You can remove that formatting if you do know you want to send it as a plain text email. So just something to note with email send actions. If you want it as sent as a rich text, you do have to enable that using the true global variable in the action. Otherwise, it's going to send as a plain text. For our next flow, I want to demonstrate deleting child records from a parent record. The use case, if you remember, was deleting opportunity line items from the opportunity itself. So moving back. That flow looks something like this. It uses screen elements, uses get opportunity elements, decision elements, and then has 2 branches for how the conclusion of the flow will appear to users. So let's go ahead and back out of this, because we'll create this one from scratch as well. This will be a screen flow. So a flow that is going to be launched from a Lightning page. I will put it in freeform layout. I think if you've been paying attention, you've noticed that the flows, as we build them, they are in freeform layout. However, you can set a flow to, let's see, actually, I can set an example up real quick. You can set a flow to have an auto layout. That's this button up here. The auto layout is just Salesforce's auto laying out to make it look clean. Today, we've been building not an auto layout. We've been building without it for a little bit of flexibility, but it's up to personal preference with how you decide to build. Moving back to our flow to get started. We know that this flow, if it's going to be launched from a Lightning record page, we are going to have to go ahead and create a resource that signifies that. In order to launch a flow from a record page and to have it be of significant value, one thing that happens pretty frequently as a common technique is creating a new resource that's a variable resource. Think about a variable resource as a resource that's value is gathered from somewhere in the flow or somewhere potentially outside of the flow. It's not necessarily a resource or a resource that is a field value, although it can be. Really, the best way to think about these is as custom fields where you can store data of records or of data from outside the flow, and they can actually allow for the storing of multiple values and creating a collection as well. This variable right here is going to store a record ID that we are going to be getting from somewhere else in the flow. Specifically, we're going to be getting it from the record that has triggered this flow. The data type of this variable will be text, as record IDs in Salesforce are text. And here's a little trick for when you're gathering, when you're using a record ID to, or when you're triggering a flow from an object or a page. You do want to have this element named record ID right here on the API name. And if you have it caps sensitive as well, so that you can see it's a lowercase r with a uppercase I, this record ID, when formatted this way, is going to signify to Flow Builder that you are pulling in the record ID from the flow from the page that this flow is firing on. And we are going to set this available for input to let Flow know that as well. So that's going to get its value from somewhere outside of the flow. So we have our start screen flow right here. And the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is grab opportunity items that are related to the opportunity. So we need a get records element. And we are going to get the opportunity line item records right now. So in terms of the label, we will say get opportunity products. Oops, and my spelling is bad. There we go. And this is going to get records of the opportunity line item, or the opportunity line items. I think that's called opportunity product in Salesforce. Because we know that we're triggering this from an opportunity. So we're going to get the child records of opportunity, which is an opportunity product. And essentially, we are looking for products where the opportunity ID is going to equal that variable record ID that we set earlier. This variable record ID is going to essentially align our records and make sure that we're only grabbing child records. We'll store all the records. It'll automatically store all the fields. Just let Salesforce decide to do that automatically. You can also set values that you want to gather specifically, but for today's demonstration, we're not going to do that. Now we need to go ahead and add a screen element. We'll say delete opportunity line items. And this screen element is going to help our users. It's going to appear when our users launch the flow specifically. We're going to hide some of the buttons down here when we configure the footer. We can use the standard labels, we can use custom labels, or we can use, or we can also hide labels entirely. So I'm going to hide the pause button. I'm going to go ahead and use the standard label for next or finish, and I'm going to hide the previous button since this is the first screen in the flow. And I'm going to add a text, description text, not a field. Oops, we'll delete that screen component. On the screen component, I'm going to add a display text to guide my users. This display text is going to just say something along the lines of op items. Do you want to delete opportunity line items? We'll click done. And we need to actually have this come right here. Start the screen flow. It will trigger an or a screen. The screen will then get our opportunity records right here. And then it will delete the records. Now, when we're looking for records to delete, we can actually just go ahead and click on this record collection variable. This opportunity product from Get Opportunity Products, the opportunity line item right here. This is going to be the collection that is deleted. It is the collection of items that started with, or that are come from this Get Records element. And so we're going to go ahead and drag that down here and click Save. Now we are running out of time a little bit, so I'm going to try to speed this up before we are done with our lunch and learn today. One thing that you do need to know about these screen flows, if you want to have them trigger from a button, is that you need to go ahead and make sure that you are building a button for them. So the opportunity object, you can see I have this delete line items. Essentially, that is going into the object, going and looking at the buttons, links, and actions. And we need a new action to define. And this action will be a flow. And you can see that the available flows to launch are right here. But the flow does have to be activated. And it should be popping up. There we go. And right there, I can select the delete line items to the flow we just created. We can set a label for it. And after that, oops, that name's already in use. After that, we would go to the page layout and add this button to the page. Now we only have 5 minutes, so I do want to get on to the next flow, and we can't demonstrate the full functionality of deleting these child records. But as long as you remember on this flow to go ahead and ensure that you are setting that variable on the resources to be record ID. When you place the button on that opportunity page, it's going to populate this record ID with the ID of the record that has fired the flow, and that's what's going to allow you to use the rest of this logic. Now, we don't have time to build the final flow from scratch today, but I do want to go ahead and take a look at it. There are 2 additional flows. We'll look at one more in depth, and then one is going to be featured in a blog about this session, which will be coming out next Tuesday. The flow I wanted to look at specifically today is this survey wizard. This survey wizard is a 3-step flow. It provides an opportunity for us to collect feedback on the products and sales process at our fictional organization. And it starts very simply just with a screen flow. Something to keep in mind is that this screen flow right here with this survey wizard, these pick list value sets are actually mapped to a custom object I have called telephone survey. This telephone survey object has a number of pick list fields on them. And if I just go and demonstrate that real quick, let's go ahead and go to telephone survey. And look at the fields and relationships. We'll say, we'll look at business rating. You can see that I have a number of values on here, pick list values 1 through 5. Back on that flow that we were, if I can find it. Oh my goodness, too many tabs. Right here. Back on that opportunity feedback flow, if we look at the quality of goods or overall rating, or would you use our customer service again? These are all mapped to pick list choice sets, and I can easily find that or define those by clicking on a input screen variable or input screen component here. Let's go ahead and click on pick list, and let's see here, business, let's say demonstration pick list business. If I want to map that pick list values of this pick list display component to one on an object that I have, I can just go ahead and click new choice resource. I will do a pick list choice set. This is gonna let me look at an object. I'm gonna look at the telephone survey. The data type will be pick list, and now I can look at fields. You can see I have my business rating field that we were just looking at as 1 through 5 there. And if I click done, this is going to allow my to map the 1 through 5 fields as available options on this input pick list. After that, I will go to create records, and we will create a telephone survey record, and you can see I can actually map the fields directly to the outcomes of the screen component that we just configured. And you can do that by essentially clicking a value. I want to say set business rating, and we will set the business rating to not a pick list value, but a pick list choice set, the one we just mapped. And that will then reflect, when it creates this record, whatever was input on the screen. Something to keep in mind as well is that since we know that we're launching this survey from an opportunity, we are using that record ID variable trick that I showed you last flow to pull the record ID in and to relate the telephone survey to the opportunity at hand. And when the telephone survey is launched, it will look a little something like this. We will launch the survey, select quality of goods 5. These other pick list value sets are mapped as well. And we will click next. And the telephone survey is now created with its values reflected. That's it for our Lunch and Learn today. I hope today was useful overall. Just some quick high-level tips before I do let you go. Remember to always build your flows in a sandbox. Be careful when you're building flows. It's very easy to automate your mistakes and to automate them faster than people can make them manually. So be sure on your use case. Do standardize your flow naming conventions using best practices and organizational standards. So document them. Today was not probably the best example at flow naming conventions and documentations as we were on a short timer, but that's something to keep in mind. Try to consolidate your flows when possible to limit the amount per object, and optimize and revisit flows frequently to prevent your technical debt. That's something you should probably be doing every quarter. Let us know you were here. You can connect with me at Audio Video Blake on Twitter, or connect with Arkus on Twitter at Arkus Inc. We will have a pretty decent blog, I would say. It's going to be a good length, coming out next Tuesday, I think, if the schedule is right. And I'm going to let Catherine, our Arkus marketing magic individual, talk a little bit more about that before I let you all go. Thanks for everyone for coming today. And just keep in mind, if you do keep an eye out for that blog, we'll be covering a little bit more advanced flow that will cover loops, bigger elements, some more advanced techniques, and it'll look a little something like this, as well as how to use relative dates in a flow start, which is something that is a really handy trick. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Blake. That was just wonderful. And I realized for everybody here that may or may not have been pretty quick. And just to remind everyone, we're going to send the recording out. It may be next week. And along with that will be this blog post you can follow along with. We'll outline some of the flows we looked at today and that more complex flow at the end. So keep an eye out for that. And then the note that as part of our effort to give back, we're donating $25 for each of you that came today to provide lunch for someone in need. So to say thank you for helping us do that. It's something we really love to do, and separate, but something we would really appreciate. I put a link to a survey. It's a 2-question survey. You know, we showed how to do a survey today, but surveys can be kind of tiresome. But if you are able to take 2 seconds right now to answer those questions, that would be incredible. We would appreciate it so much. It helps us to continue having these be valuable for you. And then the what is a POAP question, something we've been doing for fun this year's sort of a Web3 exploration is sharing POAPs, and encourage you all to look into what that is and have a taste of POAP fun right now. At the end of this survey is a link to claim a POAP. They are NFT tokens, which may or may not be exciting to some of you, but we've had a lot of fun doing this. There stands for Proof of Attendance Protocol. So it's a little badge, a little fun token to represent that you were here today. And we may be building off of this functionality later. You can explore that. It's for free. And in the follow-up we'll send out will be another link to claim that. But right now, early access at the end of this survey is a link to get your POAP. You can go explore that online too. It's sort of a teaser. We think they're really fun. And so just follow up by saying how much we appreciate you all to be here. And thank you so much. If you have any questions for Arkus, you can contact us on our website, and I'll put the link tree in here one more time. It's at the beginning. And so there's lots of content on there, some past recordings, and future events, blog posts, some plug for a great blog post by Mario. Mario's content's can be kind of complex. And so we'd love to hear from you. You can contact us in the footer of that site, or there's a button in the link tree, and or follow up directly to any of the emails I sent you. And so thank you again, and thanks to Blake and James and Scott and all the Arky team and all of you for being here. So I think that's it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I think we will go ahead and end the Lunch and Learn now. I hope you all had a great time, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, Blake, and thank you all again. Maybe we might leave it up for 2 minutes in case anybody filters back in and wants to find those links, but we're gonna hop to be on mute. So thank you all.